puny and sick and had a cold. I'm behind on everything. Y'all know I'm behind. What time is it? 3:30 something? Okay, so someone sent me a link to Ryan's live, and last night, I think it was live, or a video I did, anyway, with that American Dream Chaser dude. And so let's just FYI for most parents that watch me, people that watch me, families that watch me, this is going to be a very adult conversation. It's not going to be anything that you need to play before children that may be in your home. You don't need to have me blasting off the TV. You need to probably be listening to me via earbuds during this video, because we're going to talk about how music, how Denise, we're going to talk about adult topics with big words, with words that children don't need to know. And we're going to talk about themes that children don't need to be subjected to. So if you're a parent, you're a family member, and you're normally like, oh, Mama Liz is on, we can listen to anything she says, please be aware this is going to be an adult conversation. Do not let your children listen to this. Okay? This is great for adults, great for parents. Don't put your children in the middle of this. So put your earbuds in, Mom and Dad, and it'll be a good time to stop right now and then catch up later if you need to do that. Because what we're going to talk about today is what showed up in the video that I watched that was sent to me, which was Ryan. And thank God Ryan does pay attention, because he noticed this, and a lot of people wouldn't even notice these things. So thank goodness Ryan's paying attention. But we have to really look at it and go, is this a huge breakthrough? Is this a huge tell-all? What is it really? So what Ryan saw apparently on the Dream Chaser guy's channel was when he pulled up to share a screen, he showed his, I guess, Instagram direct messages. And there was a direct message from someone that just had Instagram user, but no longer had a profile, or had been disabled, or they had stopped. I don't know. But it was no longer, it didn't any longer look an active profile. But it said, we can gangbanger, which we all know on the internet has been used for markedly inappropriate behavior, which is, we can all agree on that, right? Right. So Ryan got really upset about this. And something, we should get upset about inappropriate statements like that, inappropriate opportunities that are transpiring over the web and that are normalizing this behavior. We should be upset about that, because it does really create an issue when kids are bombarded on social media and on the internet by these stupid people trying to make a penny off of other people's personal needs, however deviant we may feel they are. But we really have to look at it and say, does that incriminate this man? Because I've gotten some rather inappropriate DMs on Instagram and been like, oh, just block. And not knowing who they were from, what they were about, where they found me, how they, and you just get bombarded sometimes on the internet like that. Could it be more than that? Absolutely, it could. It could have been a conversation that ended with that person sending the last word, the last sentence, and then erasing their profile. It could have been a number of things. It could be a number of things, but there's only one way that I can educate you about this so that you can apply it appropriately when you see things like this, or you live something like this. And that is to talk about the two things that concern most people when it comes to the sexually explicit direct messaging and opportunities that are sent over the internet. It's so sick, because the internet should be used for knowledge, gain of knowledge, and not, anyway. That's just my perspective, my bias. That's my filter coming out. But we have to really look at psychopathy, and then we have to look at sexual fantasy. Because those two things, however they are related, they are not always attached. So we have to be very careful. Now, obviously, if someone has psychopathy, they usually pronounce in a very harsh and unemotional way. They normally are, they have a very odd behavior about them. They like to kind of be a loner and not really attach emotionally to people, even though they're capable of it. They will limit their emotional attachments. They will limit the amount of emotion, empathy, sympathy, and stuff that they show. And while it's closely related, psychopathy is closely related to antisocial behavior and and some personality disorders, I've got ink all over me from a fountain pen, and personality disorders that occur, that they're closely related, they're not always attached. They're not always a significant, oh, if we see one, we see the other. It doesn't always occur like that. And mostly what we see with people that have these fantasies are, and they have kind of a psychopathy, an emotional, harsh, colder personality, we see what we call, and they start to identify this even younger in men, is like prosocial emotions, to where they're very callous, or they're very not sympathetic, or they have no empathy. And this normally starts to present in adolescence and can amplify and turn into something else. Or it can just be a theme that is kind of a constant in their life, where they are capable of having relationships, yet they choose to have few very emotional and integrated relationships, romantic relationships, where they tend to really thrive on the unemotional contact that is just kind of the fly by night, never have to deal with you again kind of thing. It doesn't absolutely mean they're a psychopath. It doesn't absolutely mean that they're a deviant. It just means that in some way, it's not necessarily a deficit. It's more of a preference at that point. So psychopathy is one of those things that's very difficult to identify, and it has a lot of traits, but it's not really the traits that we look at for psychopathy. It's a follow through behavior. So a lot of people can have a lot of traits that identify as antisocial or psychopathic, but here's the thing, is that very few will follow through and turn those traits into actual behaviors that are criminogenic or deviant in some way. So you have to be careful, even though that studies indicate males are kind of more prominent in this regard than females. Both genders, these behaviors are present in both genders. Both genders struggle. I will say that antisocial behavior does seem to be more related to like sexual deviancy, a lot of sexual partners, a lot of anonymous, and what I would call inappropriate, dangerous sexual encounters, and not paying attention, and being more promiscuous, and being more, I guess, playing with enough danger to normally be the population that struggles with sexually transmitted diseases and other stuff like that. Now, when you start to look at people that have these antisocial behavior patterns and traits, but we can't say there's any psychopathy there, but what we start to look at when we start to kind of mesh the two together and go, oh, there could potentially be, is when we have these callous, unemotional, and people that prefer cold, detached relationships as opposed to warm, interactive, communicative, long-term, safe relationships. We look at them and go, okay, studies do indicate that, people that have a lot of sexual partners, a lot of unprotected sex, a lot of contracting disease, a lot of transmitting disease, they lean toward that group that is more likely to follow through. And when I say follow through, I mean follow through on a fantasy or a deviant behavior that they've thought about. They're more likely to have a planned, anonymous, weird encounter that would not be what most people would refer to as a established romantic relationship. I'm trying to choose my words so carefully right now. So when we start to see things represented as in a fantasy perspective, such as this DM that this man got, it doesn't actually indicate psychopathy. It may indicate some antisocial behavior where they are more inclined toward cold encounters and less emotional encounters, but it doesn't necessarily indicate psychopathy. There has to be a follow-through of behavior and some deviancy and some criminogenic issues for us to really make that jump. And it's very difficult to make that jump. It's very difficult because psychopathy is really on a continuum, and it relies on a lot of traits and follow-through behaviors. And so it's very difficult to really assign psychopathy to someone when they're maybe just showing traits of antisocial behavior and a preference for less emotional interactions with people. So you have to be super careful, because you'll make that jump in your mind because of what we see in blowing up in this world, which is a lot of sex trafficking, a lot of inappropriate people that are attracted to minors, a lot of criminal prosecution for sex offenders and sexual assault, sexual deviancy, and all this stuff. And so we're hyper sensitive to these words and these topics, but you really need to understand what they mean. So sexual fantasy is not a negative thing. 99.9% of functioning adults have these. It doesn't mean that you're going to follow a negative pattern, or you're going to create negative behavior, or you're going to take yourself to the dark side per se. It just means that you have a healthy imagination. Now, where we start to get into the linking of people with sexual fantasies and these traits, these unemotional, callous, cold, detached, and the people that have the preference for the less romantic and more anonymous sexual encounters, that's where we start to see this weaving together to go, okay, that may be an issue. Now, if we have some antisocial behavior issues, and we've seen a long-term progression of this, maybe we're getting to someone who is not functioning well, who may have some other issues. But psychopathy is it's a very varied, hard to connect the dots kind of thing to look at. Normally, we identify someone that has psychopathy or the traits that indicate that as being someone that is very aggressive, someone's very deceptive. They like to coerce people, use people. And they have very deviant behavior. So they're okay with a lot of the paraphilias that are out there. You can look all 9 of those up if you want to. I'm not going to go through them. But they're okay when they cross that line. They're okay taking those thoughts and fantasies and traits and turning them into behaviors that follow through with those fantasies, how deviant or inappropriate they may be or criminal they may be. So it's kind of a stacked layer of things. And it's kind of funny because it's in the cluster B area. And so when you hear cluster B and you work in this field, you're kind of like, ugh, because it's one of those areas where there's a lot of talk and a lot of research, but a lot of research contradicts itself. And a lot of it is you feel through it, but you try to put it together, but you honestly normally miss something until there is a criminogenic process that has taken place. And then you're like, shoot, I missed it. So it can be kind of difficult for practitioners. Let's just say this, that people that have psychopathy, it's normally linked with not romantic fantasies, aggressive, dominant, anonymous, multiple partner, engage and get the heck out of Dodge, no committal, no romance. So it's very much different than a committed relationship, someone who is in a warm relationship and testing boundaries and barriers. It's very different. But from the outside, when most of us just see certain behaviors or we hear certain words, we immediately go in our mind to a very negative, dark place. So it's really about follow-through behaviors. It's not necessarily about indicators or words or being hypersensitive to things that we see online. It's about, are these people having follow-through behaviors? I agree it's distasteful to talk about certain things. It's distasteful to discuss certain things. It shows a lot of issues when you discuss things that should be regarded as very personal, intimate, and important acts of life, and you treat them very cold, callous, and you take a very, even sometimes comical perspective to them. I agree it's distasteful, but I have to set that aside and I have to look at the diagnostics and statistical data and say, are these linked? Are they related? Or is there a progression to actual physical behavior? And if so, is that behavior criminogenic or deviant in any way? So obviously, the more traits that people have, the more red flags people have, the more likely they are to progress toward the other side of the fence and become someone that could potentially be a concern. But I'm not sure we saw anything super powerful in that DM other than a young man or a pushing middle-aged man verbally expressing a hormonal outburst or responding to someone who was sending him a hormonal outburst. I don't think we saw anything that's deviant, criminogenic. I just think we saw the darker side of the nasty web where people normalize detached relationships, that's the nicest way I can say that. I'm still trying to be as nice about this as I can. But there's really no clear data about what creates the behavior, what full circles the behavior. It's all conflicting, it's all confusing, and you just kind of have to look at, okay, I'm seeing some antisocial traits, I'm seeing some not so healthy emotional boundaries, or some lack of empathy and sympathy and lack of care of others. Now I'm seeing that assigned to how they use others for their sexual preference, if they have a callous detachment for that. But the thing is do they follow through and turn it into a deviant or criminogenic behavior? That's the kicker. That, for me, that's, of course, I was always in corrections, so for me, that's the kicker. But we have to remember that that preference does not always mean there's a deficit within that person. So just because someone may have a preference for something doesn't mean that they have a deficit. It means they have a preference. Normally, a deficit means that they cannot have a functioning relationship that is more normative and assigns to more of the social contract that everyone else assigns to. It just means that they have a preference. Now, if they do have a deficit, then that creates a whole nother issue and a whole nother video and a whole nother thing. But normally, if there is a deficit, the people with the true deficits are the ones that continue that through to the criminal behavior and the deviant behavior. And then there we go, we're slippery slope down the hill. The one thing that people do need to understand is that what we saw in that video was just an expression of what has happened since the internet came to be. It amplified the ability of those with specific traits to contact others who may have the same specific traits, to seek out those who have a preference for these cold, detached, anonymous, quick relationships with no emotion. And it kind of amplifies that side of the sexual foundation of adulthood rather than amplifying what we see more as the emotional, committed relationships that we think are more appropriate, especially within a society that raises families and has healthy boundaries. So what we're seeing is just the internet being used to amplify a preference. Sadly, when it amplifies that preference, some people with deficits find it and they use that to then progress through to commit acts and behaviors that are deviant and criminogenic. But we can't always link them all. We can't make the jump. We can't always make the assumption. And we have to be super careful when we look at people and we want to assign these words, traits, or diagnoses. Please don't, unless you're a medical professional. Please don't. I kind of get on here and try to dumb it down and kind of make it easier for you all to understand, because it is so difficult. Anything that has to do with antisocial behavior, which starts very young but is very touchy about diagnosing, and especially certain things are not diagnosed until after adulthood, there is kind of this chasm for antisocial personality disorders, melancholia, depression, people that are more detached, distant, but they don't necessarily have a deficit. They can build appropriate relationships. They just choose to have a minimal amount of those in their life. So there is a relationship with all of these things, but it's terribly hard to assign any kind of diagnosis or treatment plan until everything kind of weaves together and shows that we have a true issue. It's one that you have to be very careful in those areas. So that's why it's one of those very confusing areas for a lot of practitioners. It's one of those very confusing areas for a lot of people that are in their pubescent to young adult eras, because that's when a lot of those preferences and deficits present. So it's kind of everyone's in a perfect storm there for a little while. And so while I have seen a lot of the people that have had the preferences that have then followed through and made the behaviors and actions and deviant criminogenic behaviors, I fully understand that occurs. It happens. But I also fully understand that to have a healthy, functioning adult population in the world, we are going to have certain fantasies, certain encounters that are going to be publicized, amplified, and marketed for monetary and financial gain. And that is just the way our world, sadly, and the internet works. When you find something that everybody does, you can make a penny off everybody, and you want to get your penny off everybody. So sadly, what has happened is through the years, the way that they have marketed that has gone from more of the caring, romantic behaviors that we would see in a Hallmark movie or a very steamy romance to more of the colder preference side, which concerns us a little bit more as a society. When we see that detachment emotionally, we get a little bit more concerned. But what you need to worry about is, are they showing the traits, having the issues with multiple partners, cold and detached relationships, other issues, other mood affect issues going on, and then, but do they actually go through and follow through and create a behavior and action that is deviant or criminogenic, that needs a punishment, a punitive consequence, or treatment? And so all of those are all different, and we can't lump them all together. I know it's hard to talk about, and it would be easier if you were sitting here talking to me, but I just wanted to explain that. So what Ryan saw, yes, I think it's distasteful. I think it's horrible that the internet is used to try to elicit these responses from strangers out in the ether. I think because you don't know who it's going to, and you don't know who it's affecting. I think it has a poor and dangerous effect on our youth who are growing up seeing more and more of this, because we cannot police the internet quick enough as much as it's growing. And so a lot of things that should not be normalized are being normalized. A lot of things that would normally stay in the preference to trait category are getting tripped over into the follow through with behaviors and actions because it's being normalized on the internet. It's being normalized. And we absolutely need to speak out when we see stuff like that. We need to say that's not healthy. Back up. Who all could be seeing that? Are juveniles able to access that? Are you accessing juveniles? Is this something we really need to report? But what are we seeing there? We potentially may just be seeing someone trying to take advantage of direct messaging to coerce someone that may have a preference for that and nothing else. Could it be something else? Absolutely. I just think we need to keep our minds open and not jump to assign guilt or blame before we know what's going on. Now, do I think all of this is weird? Yeah, I think all of it's very weird. Do I think that there are people with guilty consciences and guilty parties that need to come forward? Yeah, I do. I think, yeah, I do. Are there things that are completely unnatural about this case that everybody's looking at? Absolutely. Absolutely. And when I say unnatural, I mean in physical behavior and evidentiary empirical data, all the way around. Unnatural. So I have the same concerns, but I have to sit back and question myself and say, what bias or what filter am I applying to that? And how much do I want to believe it? And the more I want to believe it, the more I have to challenge myself to research the other way and to find the balance, because normally the balance is more of the truthful positioning of stuff. So I have to be careful. But I just wanted to explain this. A direct message from somebody trying to sell you a pornographic link is probably not damning material, although it does not bode well for our society. Now, if you have DMs where he actually is speaking about following through with his behaviors and actions, then we might have something we need to be more concerned about. But we just need to be careful and not make too many jumps without the appropriate information. And we need to make sure that when we are trying to put people in categories, we categorically understand how we need to put them there, how they're assigned. And I think everybody needs to chill. I support Ron. I think he's asking great questions. I think he has every right to ask the questions. I think he has every right to have boundaries for behavior that he says, I'm not okay with this. I think he has every right to state his opinion. I wish sometimes he would take 2 or 3 days to really look into things before he lets the cat out of the bag, so that if it is something that turns into a nothing, he can just let it go and not present a lot of nothings, but hang on to it and only present the somethings. For me, that would be better for me. It would create less of a hubbub and less of a unhinged looking moment for him. But I fully think that he is doing what we as a society should do when we see children disappear. We understand that trafficking is happening in our nation. We understand that the criminal consequences for people that have certain affinities is becoming less and less restrictive, and so parents need to be more and more aware. We need to be asking these questions and standing up and having healthy boundaries. And that has not happened for a number of years in our society. Everything has always leaned one way, or we've had to take steps to meet somebody in the middle, but they've never taken a step. It's only been one party moving. So yes, I agree. What he's doing, we need to be doing. Everyone should be more aware. Everyone should be looking more critically at their surroundings and the people that are in roles of authority in their area. I think that's healthy. I think knowledge is always power. Knowledge and information is always more important than emotions, though. So always go for knowledge and information before you go for emotions, because we don't want to be on the internet holding people emotional hostages when we don't have the information, knowledge, and behavior actions, concrete data, proof to back it up. So I just wanted to get in here and say that just be careful. It's one of those things where, you get so far down the rabbit hole, the momentum will just suck you on down through. We got to be careful. We got to think, and we've got to calm down. And while I think it is distasteful, and I certainly would not have enjoyed seeing, I would have pulled my DM page up if that had been on there. I mean, logic, But I also understand that he's not in control of everyone that sends him DMs. You can only block it once somebody sends you something nasty. So I understand that you're not always in control of that. So I have to look at it both ways. And I'm not defending the man per se. I'm defending that this is something that could happen to anybody at any moment. We could get one of these DMs, and if we chose to share a screen, it would be there. Would we want someone jumping to that same thought process about us when we're obviously not in control of that until they've already sent us the material so that we can block them? So it's just, think about it. Now, if he's looking at other information or he has other questions, he knows how to reach me. Brian, you know how to reach me. You can ask me questions. But I don't necessarily think this was as much of a gotcha moment as much as it was just an embarrassing moment that might have shown some preferences that a young man had that may not have been what we would pursue as the healthiest preferences. But I don't think it was incriminating at this moment. And that's where I am. So we got through it. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm not standing up for anyone. I'm just trying to step back and logically look at everything that's being seen. And I have to focus on what is being seen and research, studies, and stuff like that. I can't go on what I emotionally feel is occurring. That is where you get yourself into trouble. So if you're emotionally sucked into this, please take a moment and detach and calm down and break away from this and clear your brain, because we're all going a little haywire right now, and we just all need to chill out and just take a day. But be careful what labels you throw on others, because something, they can sling them right back. So as a society, we need to be a little bit more gracious and a little bit more understanding, but we still do need to have those difficult conversations. We just need to find the balance and how to do so. And right now, we're not balancing very well. I hope it does occur soon. I hope that we get back to being a world that can have a dialogue, communication, a misunderstanding that can be negotiated and corrected. I hope all these things occur. I just didn't see a whole lot to be concerned about from that. But if there are more other DMs or he's actively talking about younger females, that would concern me. I didn't see any of that. I just saw a message sent to him by a no longer active user, and I can't control those people that send me messages, so I'm not going to say that he can either. And you can't block them until you already get them. I can't cry foul. Not yet. So breathe, everybody. Research, educate, don't jump emotionally. Ryan, you're doing good work. Sometimes the hamster in the wheel spins too fast and then he gets flung out. If we can just like slow the hamster down about 5 miles an hour so he doesn't get flung out of the wheel every 5 minutes, excellent work. So let's work on some calm review of a few things and then go from there. I did notice that you kept your cool much better in that live, and I'm very proud of you for that. I still, my wish is that you would hang on to stuff for 24, 48, 72 hours, research and review the heck out of it. And then if it still makes sense after that amount of time, then present it. And it would be something. Because right now we're getting a lot of nothings and then something. But all the nothings are creating an ambivalence for people that are using this to become aware and educated about what is actually occurring, and all these disappearances and possible sex trafficking and inappropriate inappropriate preferences that turn into deviant behavior in our nation. Everybody needs to learn about that. But if we could have them learn about it in a setting that is less hostile, less ambivalent, and at times creates a very much melancholy about the topic itself, if we could do it where we're really discussing meat and not fluff, that would be great. So that's the only recommendation I would have for you is hang on to information, research the hound out of it, and after 2 or 3 days it still is holding its validity, then share it. But take your time and go through everything methodically. Do not go through things emotionally. Do not make judgment jumps emotionally. Go through it methodically, analytically, and from a very compartmentalized, emotionally detached space. And if you get super emotional, take a day or 2 off. But I think as a nation, we definitely need to have healthier boundaries. We definitely need to have more communication, more dialogue, learn how to negotiate again, and discuss. Because I do think for many years, our entire nation has gone from preferred behaviors that we could talk about and balance and kind of hang on to. Now everybody's going toward deviant actions. And I've noticed that in basically all aspects of life. It's just everyone's going straight for deviant behavior or inappropriate actions that lead to deviant behavior, inappropriate actions that have real huge consequences and ramifications for people. And because we're not having these conversations here when it's a preference, we're waiting until it becomes an issue. And so we need to start talking here again. It's painful. And it's going to hurt our nation. It's going to be a struggle, but it will end up being a blessing if we can get back to where we discuss things and we could talk about it before it becomes an issue. That would be great. That would be awesome. I'm going to shut up now. I hope I put a few wrinkles in your brain. If you have questions, put them in the comments below, but try to word your questions appropriately because this is a touchy topic. But I would say get out there and start looking this stuff up. Start looking at the paraphilia issues and deviancy issues and how it escalates with hormonal issues and normalization and societal acceptance. Go look at how this has changed criminal statistics and the age of victims in crimes of passion When I say crimes of passion, I know it means also more than that, but I'm trying to be polite. Go educate yourself. Go look at the amplification as our society has become more accepting and more justifying of not just preferences but deviant behavior. Go look at how it's changed the criminal stats in our nation. You might be amazed. There's a definite reason we all need to be aware of this and talking about this and upset about this. We just probably don't need to be screaming at each other. We need to be screaming at the problem. And perhaps the problem is not each other as much as movements, political parties, political affiliations, lax laws, lobbying, other things like that. So, everybody, thank you for your time, because you can never get it back. I appreciate it, and I hope it helped a little bit. I think if you want a more in-depth view of this case, or someone that takes it apart a little bit more, I think I would recommend Allegedly Innocent's channel. And she is more educated than I am in this. I have more of a criminogenic corrections background, more of a forensic psychology background, and she has more of a clinical applied. And she's still, I believe, still actively working. So she's also, in that regard, a much better outlet to ask questions for. I would recommend her channel. She talks openly about this, and she's very easy to follow and understand, and she breaks it down. And when she does have something she really wants to fuss about, she tells you why, how, when, where. She explains it so well. I would recommend her channel. And I like that Plunder is very calm when she speaks. So I'm liking that right now. Other than that, I'm still leery of a lot of people. And even though I'm recommending these two people, they could say something tomorrow that could completely blow my mind. So, but right now that's where I am. And I know a lot of you ask questions about what would you recommend, what would you look at, who are you watching. That's about all I'm watching, the news outlets. Because I try to stay, if I'm not looking at actual media and law enforcement updates, then I try to only look at people who are taking apart those media and law enforcement updates. So I try to not fray and jump and chase squirrels and run circles. But I will say this case is hinky from the get-go. And as someone who had a badge for a number of years, the violations on laws, regulations, and just how you investigate a potential crime scene or accident, all of these things have just kind of made me go, what the crap? I would have been fired 10 times over if I'd been employed in that area. So I'm like, how are we getting away with all this when we've got county, state, and federal level people overhead watching this? Why is there no accountability? Why is there no correction? Why are we not seeing these things? So I have just as many questions. I'm just not willing to jump on just as many wagons yet. So be critical and never believe anything on the internet that anyone tells you, even me. Go do your own research, put your own wrinkles in your own brain, and make your own truth and assumptions, and understand how you made them, why you made them, and be able to back them up. That's the most important thing you can do for yourself. So I'm going to shut up now. I might be back later if I have something worth saying. Might not. I've got one of my bonus kids is going to visit this evening. I'm feeling better. I've not had a fever now for a long time. And I have got to get some stuff done that requires more hand strength than I have currently with my neuromuscular issues that are going on. And so I have help to accomplish a few tasks this evening. So I don't know if I'll be live or not. I may. But I just wanted to put this out there because this is information y'all needed to know. So thank you for your time. Crew, I may see you later. I love yous. Be good to people. I'll shut up now. Bye, guys.